The subgroup that Emily, Ryan, and I are representing today is teenagers with anorexia. Unfortunately, all disorders, not just anorexia, have some type of stereotype or misconception about them. One of the major stereotypes that people have for anorexia in teens is the idea that only women have it, when in fact 10 to 15% of those who suffer from anorexia are males, but men are much less likely to seek treatment due to this stereotype. Not speaking for all, but many teenage boys feel scared to seek treatment because they are nervous it will damage their masculinity. Another misconception is the belief that once a teen who struggles with anorexia starts to gain a little bit of weight, they are cured for good. Many people do not understand that an eating disorder is a mental illness in which a person values themselves exclusively on how they look and their body image. If a teen with anorexia begins to become uncomfortable with the idea of themselves gaining weight, they will most likely relapse over time if they do not seek out proper help. However, many teenagers with anorexia do not seek out help because much of the time they do not see that what they are doing is disordered. Receiving the necessary level of care as soon as possible increases the likelihood of long-term recovery. As a last misconception, that anorexia is not that serious. This could not be further from the truth, as anorexia nervosa has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Teenagers go through extreme lengths to control the amount of food they are eating, and in worst case, they stop eating altogether. 50% of teens with anorexia can also go on to develop other eating disorders such as bulimia or binge eating disorder due to the restriction of calories for so long. And a quote I have here is, young women with anorexia are 12 times more likely to die than women with the same age who do not have anorexia. For the interview portion of my research, I chose to speak to a female student, age 19, that attends James Madison University. However, she would prefer it if I kept everything that was stated anonymous, as some of the questions asked were quite personal. Just to preface this portion of the presentation, she was aware and approved of the fact that I would be presenting her information to my classmates. The first question I asked was, at what age did you understand that you were suffering from anorexia nervosa? And her response to this was that she was not exactly sure. She became aware of her habits and that it could be defined as anorexia nervosa at age 18. However, this is extremely common in teenagers with eating disorders. I also asked her what she thinks the leading cause of her disorder was. She told me that the leading cause may have been the comments her mother would make about eating habits and her body growing up. This being said, research has shown that the environment a teenager grows up in can be a major cause in the development of an eating disorder. However, it is commonly believed that teenagers develop anorexia because they want to look like a supermodel or what they see on TV. But this is not always the case. I think the most eye-opening portion of the interview was when I asked what she believes is the most common thing people do not understand about anorexia. She stated, I've heard people say things like, just eat that, and things like that. And I always think to myself, like, it's really not that easy, you know? Sometimes I wish I would let myself just eat. You know what I mean? Like, having anorexia, or any eating disorder really, is not a choice, which I don't think people who haven't suffered from this disease really understand at all. It took me so long to even recognize that I was indeed suffering from anorexia. Likewise, recovering itself is not nearly as easy as one would expect. You go through a lot of mental struggles. I feel like there is no better way to phrase what she said, so I will let her words speak for themselves for this question. She wanted me to emphasize the fact that she is not calling out anyone for not understanding, because mental illness is hard to comprehend when you're not suffering from it directly. The last question I chose to ask her was any advice she would give to someone who might be suffering from anorexia. She suggested that it is easiest to talk to someone if you think that you are struggling. Reach out to someone. Having someone to talk to will make recovery so much easier, as having a solid support system is going to help you much more than if you were going through something alone. She also said, I honestly wish I would have reached out to someone earlier, but I am thankful for how far I've come and how hard I have worked. Holding this interview felt so surreal and eye-opening, as I had been close friends with this girl for a while. It made me realize how difficult it is to actually notice that someone is struggling as much as they are. I think that during this time especially, it was hard to notice physical changes to her body because we were going through quarantine, so I did not see her as often or at all. I do wish she would have talked to someone sooner. This being said, I don't blame her for finding it hard to reach out to someone for when you are struggling. During her interview, she stated that she is well into recovery, and for that I am proud of her. For my second story from my research on anorexia in teenagers, I chose to watch an educational video titled Anorexia Nervosa: Causes, Effects on the Brain, and Recovery, Mass General Brigham. The speaker in the video is Dr. Cameron T. Eddy, a clinical psychologist and co-director of the Eating Disorders Clinical and Research Program at Mass Gen Hospital. She is also a professor of psychology in the Department of Psychiatry in the Harvard Medical School. With all these credentials, it is clear that what she is saying is reliable information. The first thing spoken about is the definition of anorexia nervosa, which can be physically and mentally characterized. Physically, anorexia is defined by being underweight, but teenagers can struggle with symptoms of anorexia and not be underweight, known as atypical anorexia nervosa, which is just as severe. The mental characteristics are not as recognizable as the physical to most, but include restriction of energy intake, fear of gaining weight, and disturbances of body image. These characteristics do not come from a single cause, as there are genetic factors, psychological factors, and social factors, like spending time online and social media, that can influence a teen's eating habits. Some of the psychological factors that increase an eating disorder are perfectionism, low self-esteem, anxiety, body dissatisfaction, and overemphasis on a thin body. The next portion of the video describes the effects of anorexia on a teenager's brain, which include global shrinking of the gray and white matter of the brain, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating. Compared to other eating disorders, anorexia has the highest mortality rate, which is 5 times more likely to die compared to someone who never experiences this disease, and 18 times more likely to die from suicide. Other disorders commonly occurring with anorexia nervosa are mood and anxiety disorders and substance abuse. For someone who is suffering with anorexia, it is good to work with a doctor or pediatrician and a therapist. 2 treatments deemed most effective for those who are suffering are family-based treatment for teens and adolescents and cognitive behavioral therapy. A quote that I added that Dr. Eddy ends the video with is, "Hold out hope for recovery."
There are 3 requirements to be diagnosed with anorexia. The first one is weight loss. The person must have a restriction of food intake, which will result in weight loss or which has already resulted in weight loss. The second requirement is fear. The person has intense fear of gaining weight or becoming overweight. The third one is self-image. The person has a disturbance in the way they look or lack of attention to how skinny they are. There are 2 types of signs of anorexia: emotional and physical. Some of the emotional signs are the person wears baggy clothes constantly, denying being hungry, constant comments about being overweight, and they don't eat in public. Some physical signs are stomach cramps, fainting, sleeping, difficulty concentrating, constantly feeling drained of energy. These are just some of the signs, but not all of them. Now, Allie Clyde's story. Allie Clyde was a teenager who was going through a hard time and turned to anorexia. She suffered for years because of her poor self-image and then finally recovered. During COVID, she relapsed. She became anorexic again and it got bad. At Allie's lowest, she was 5'5" and under 100 pounds. This really affected Allie in the way she lived her life. She then, after COVID, recovered again and is now doing better than ever.
Hi, my name's Emily Heron, and my 2 stories consist of an interview and a poem. So first we have the interview, which was done with a friend from high school. She's currently a sophomore, age 20, at University of Pittsburgh, and I kept her name anonymous, but she's aware that I'm doing this for a project. So for her life growing up, she has parents who are high school sweethearts, 1 older brother of 4 years, and a dog. And she described her life as having a great childhood with lots of friends, good grades, active in sports and clubs. And there were a couple events where she listed of those thoughts worsening. So the first one was having an iPhone at a young age. She felt like social media is a very toxic thing to have at that young of an age. And she also grew up being a gymnast, which is also toxic, having to constantly think and compare your body to others. And then the biggest one that she said was the pandemic. She lost touch with a lot of people who kept her grounded, and she fell in a dark place for a while. Both of her parents were full-time working, and her brother was away at college, so she was alone for most days, and she was constantly battling mental and physical health. And then a quote that she shared was, "On my birthday 2 years ago in 2020, I was in the depths of my eating disorder. I didn't let myself enjoy my day. I didn't listen to my body. I'm a perfectionist, and it turned into my worst quality. I needed my body to be perfect, or at least I needed people to think it was. Over the past 2 years, I've worked so hard to recover. I watched the people I love shed tears because I was so ill and irritable." And something that kept her happy through recovery is being at University of Pittsburgh. She really loves the school and all the friends she made. She's joined a sorority, and she's also a pharmacy major and enjoys chemistry a lot. And she said, though it's stressful, it's even more rewarding doing what I love. And she also enjoys journaling as well. So she'll write down her thoughts, so she's not keeping it in, and then she'll eventually share it with her therapist. And then lastly, advice for people is live in the moment, appreciate and listen to your body, genuinely laugh and smile, build better and stronger relationships with your family. So then we have the poem. This poem was written in August of 2018 by Asher M., who is a transgender male. They found out they were transgender in 7th grade and had a lot of hardships growing up with being trans, bullying for their weight and acne, and also a toxic family environment. So he would constantly get comments from his family like, "You're anorexic," from his sister and his mom telling him he should eat more, which doesn't help the problem at hand. It's triggering. And the sister also said that he should die in a hole multiple times. This caused him to fake happiness. He wanted everyone to think he was happy. And the lack of support from his fathering disowned him, made him feel like an outcast in his own home, and he felt like he had nothing to live for. So this all contributed to him eventually having these thoughts. So for a conclusion, from learning about this disorder, it's very complex, and there's many mental and physical effects that go into it. And there's also no clear cause. It really just depends on the person. With that being said, you don't know what a person goes through. There's a constant up-down battle and an out-of-body feeling. And there is a cure, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to get there. It's a long recovery battle, and some people struggle a lot. And the last piece of advice I have is, if you think of a comment that you're going to say and you have to think if it's wrong, then you probably shouldn't say it. And there's our references. Thank you for listening to the presentation.